My name is Stacy Broadwell. I'm going to be your host for today. I am the CEO of the TechRecruit conferences. I know many of you have attended or know of our events, and events aren't going on right now. So we're doing virtual events, and because of the whole COVID-19 and the amount of layoffs and furloughs, we're trying to come together and find out what can we do to help people and provide a strategy for their job searches. And a couple of the people on our call today are also looking for job themselves. So it's kind of like part reality show, part process, right? So we're gonna go ahead and dive into the job search process. And really what we want you to get out of this is a project management method that you can follow. So you're not just, if you haven't done something in a long time, and many of you have been in work for maybe a decade or more or less or what have you, when's the last time you looked for a job? And so you might not know where to start. So we're gonna debunk some of those things. We're gonna talk about the best methods, all created by talent acquisition professionals who build those channels to funnel talent. And I can't think of better people to do it. But at the same time, if you're a recruiter, you might not know how to build your resume and put yourself out there. So, it definitely goes both ways. So we have a great panel today. We're going to talk about that. I want to give you a little synopsis of talent acquisition technologies, because you're probably thinking, well, don't I just make my resume better and then put it out there and then I'll get called from a recruiter? The talent acquisition technology industry has advanced in so many different ways. I mean, it's probably easy to say in the history of talent acquisition and recruiting and job searching, you looked at newspapers, you put your ad in the newspaper, people called and applied, in the very beginning. And then it moved to a desktop-based applicant tracking systems as a way to capture talent. And then it moved to cloud-based applicant tracking systems. And then it moved to mobile talent acquisition system, applicant tracking systems, job searches where you could just apply online. It has made the search fundamentally different. And I tell you this because it is for these reasons that it's all that more important that you understand that a lot of what you're going to be doing is personal branding, how to put yourself out there, how to make yourself appealing, how to find the right jobs, and how to find the right companies. And so that's the thing we're going to talk about today. But the biggest trend that I see, what I think is going to really change the scope of everything, and I think this is imperative, and that's people analytics. I fundamentally believe that people analytics, human capital analysis, the studies of looking at what's great in every single human being and analyzing that and removing barriers is the trends that we are seeing. So we're talking about talent acquisition trends and new technology. That is the biggest one I see. So embracing the AI and the machine learning in those technologies is going to be super important. In the 1930s, it was all about behavioral gut instinct hiring. That's where we've run into the most problems. We are now looking at that theory has been wrong, and math theory and algorithms are really where things are at. So I'm looking at those things. You can go to our website, techrecruit.io. You can look at the articles I've written on this, but I want to go ahead and get started on how to launch, plan, execute, follow up your job search. And I'm going to start with Brett Feig. Brett, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys, and thank you, Stacy. Appreciate you having us. My name is Brett Feig. For the past 15 years, I've been working in sourcing, talent acquisition, and for the last 6 years within a very large media agency advertising company. So I've done everything from lead large teams to build and design sourcing functions from the ground up. I've hired and counseled and reviewed thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of resumes, seen different approaches. It's a wealth of sort of experience and just time behind me. And like most people on this call, I'd say everyone on this call, kind of another of the latest casualties of the COVID market, of the COVID fallout and financial cutbacks. So that started my journey into a lot of the material that we're going through today.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us, Brett. He's going to be leading the discussions. He's actually the one who wrote the outlines on this. The next person I want to introduce quickly is Kim Jones. Kimberly Jones has spoken at my first TechRecruit conference here in Los Angeles in 2018, and she's also spoken at our Orange County Talent Acquisition TechRecruit conference on diversity and inclusion. Just an incredible voice in the space, and I'm so excited to have her. Kimberly Jones, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, good afternoon. Stacy, thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. So I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Kelton Legend, Talent Acquisition Consulting Practice. Shout out to all the women who are in leadership roles, especially as business owners. Got my start through a number of corporate experiences, NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, GE Aviation, Honda, and Nationwide. And through the wealth of that experience, I proudly can boast that I have filled positions on all 7 continents. And so I hope to be able to bring to the group today wisdom, advice, encouragement for anybody who is in the job market right now, especially those who are in a position to help people who have been impacted.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Kimberly. We're looking forward to a good show and some good insights.
Yes.
Alan Fleur. Alan Fleur is on the show with us today. I'm going to go ahead and introduce him. Alan's spoken at a couple of my conferences. He is very vocal. You've seen him on Monsters show and, I'm sorry, The Animal. And Alan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Alan Fleur here. I'm a 20-plus year talent acquisition professional. I've built teams. I've helped companies get better, stand up, and get ready for IPOs. Currently, I am the talent acquisition director for a billion-dollar commercial construction firm in Southern California. Looking forward to this, and let's dig in, Brett.
All right, Brett, all you.
I'm going to launch my PowerPoint and start the conversation in a second, but before I do, just want to acknowledge anyone who has currently been impacted or is suffering or has friends and family who have been impacted by COVID, by injustices, by any of the riots. Like, our hearts go out to you.
Yeah.
You know, this has been one of the toughest job markets that anyone's experienced in the past 20 years, going back probably even tougher than, you know, the subprime mortgage dropout. And, you know, this idea to bring the community together to start having conversations kind of came about because we realized that there's a lot of advice out there. There's a lot of conflicting advice. There's people giving advice that haven't job searched in years. In fact, do all those rules, do all those common sense things that we were told, do they hold up now? So we brought this panel together to start the discussion and make it a communal discussion. And the fact that you're here, the fact that you're even joining us, means you're sort of part of that 10% of the recruiting community who is taking right action right now. You're not the ones that are sitting back and making excuses on why it's so tough, and it is. You know, why it's so grueling, and it is. But you're the ones that are saying, all right, there has to be a better way. You know, you're not cursing the darkness. You're finding a way to light a candle. And I think that's great. Cool. Now, guys, we're going to try to make this as participatory as possible. So if you're seeing this in the chats, put your name, put where you're from, put your LinkedIn profile if you feel comfortable. Part of building a network is building a network amongst each other. So I recommend it. Stacy will read out comments and questions. We'll do our best to sort of answer that. So a couple of top line things that will help put everything in perspective and just to messaging to carry you through. One, searching for a job is kind of part art and kind of part science. So there is no silver bullet. There is no perfect method. But what there is a lot of different opinions and a lot of different options and a lot of different methods. Many of them will work for you. Some of them won't. But the key is to listen to everyone's opinion here. And at times, you know, we all have kind of different advice to give, and be willing to step outside your comfort zone because we're going to try to tackle the entire kind of a job hunting sequence, right? From the beginning to I have a job over the course of this and the next couple of webinars, which we'll talk about towards the end. But we're going to try to get through as much as we can here, but there's so much content to cover. So, cool. So I want to start with 2 mantras that I want everyone to be thinking about and will help preface everything else we're saying. First, hope is not a strategy. You sitting around and hoping that things will change is the exact opposite of what you should do. And I sort of really love this quote by Albert Einstein, because I think there's a likeliness to kind of keep trying the same thing, keep applying to jobs over and over and over again, and hoping that tomorrow's going to be the day that your details line up at the top of the pile. And that's just not a good strategy. So in thinking about trying something that maybe you would have not otherwise, or stepping outside your comfort zone, kind of keep these in the back of your mind. So how did we break this down? How did we think about the job search process? We kind of looked at it from a recruiter standpoint, like, okay, when we recruit candidates, we could think about it in two different markets, and we sort of flipped it on its head and said, you know what, it's kind of the exact same thing. It's kind of the exact polar opposite. And we said that we could talk about the job search in kind of two distinct ways. We could talk about the active market, which is any action you're taking surrounding a job post. Or we could think about it in the passive market, which are jobs that aren't being posted, the ones that get crafted around people, or just no ad is ever pumped out there. And what's kind of interesting is that one is going to be the highest competition, and according to Forbes, about 70% of all jobs are kind of in the passive marketplace. Well, today we're going to be focusing a lot of this webinar on the active part, because there's a lot here. And quite frankly, the passive part could be an entire 2-hour webinar in and of itself. So let's sort of jump right into it. Optimizing your brand. This is really, before you even think about applying, before you send out your first resume, before you reach out to your first connection to say, hey, guess what, I'm looking, you should have gone through something like this. And if you haven't, think about this. There's a couple of things that will get you primed and ready to go, and a couple of things to avoid, quite frankly. And one is, you want to audit your brand across all social media accounts. You want to make sure that if you're found, if someone Googles your name, if someone looks at an application and does some research online, that your brand, your online image, is communicating and saying the same thing that your resume is. And that means, logging out of your accounts, go to incognito mode, and just check out, make sure that everything looks good. Check out your Facebook. If you're a Twitter person, if you're on TikTok, make sure that everything is really job appropriate, that there's nothing there that you'd be a little bit upset if a future employee happened to stumble upon that. And I think that's the first thing you do. The second thing you want to jump into right away is to make sure you're updating your resume and your LinkedIn profiles, right? You want to make sure that's done. Now, and it's a good time to kind of jump into some kind of questions here, but Kim, you brought up some interesting points when we were talking offline about the importance of your resume and that profile and sort of how that speaks. Can you talk a little about that?
Sure. So for me, as a recruiter, especially because I've worked for organizations that attracted a lot of candidates. So it was not uncommon to open a rec and an hour later, or 2 days later, to have 200 resumes. And so our goal was always to find the best talent. And so before you pick up the phone or decide who you want to phone screen, I really relied on what that candidate's resume was sharing, was telling me. The same goes to when we just source resumes. And so what I always tell job seekers is, your resume is your voice. In a very literal way, your resume is your voice. And so when you think about that, what does your resume say to the recruiter or to the hiring manager? And so if you kind of flipped the script and looked at what your resume is telling people about you, what type of work did you perform? And important to that is, how did it impact the organization? And if your resume does not tell that story, you will probably receive one of the dreaded disposition emails saying that you are no longer being considered. We wish you the best of luck in the future. Don't let your voice put you in that position. Let your voice put you in the position of, we'd like to schedule time to speak with you because we read what you shared with us, and we believe that you're best suited to be considered for this opportunity.
Interesting. Now, one of the questions that came up was sent in actually before this presentation, where do recruiters look at kind of the beautiful formatted resume, or are most recruiters reliant on solely kind of ATS output? Alan, could you kind of tackle that one initially? Because I think that's we're going to see kind of three separate opinions here.
We will. And what it really comes down to is format and whatever else. It's about content. Just like Kim was talking about, it's about content. It needs to be readable. It needs to flow. It needs to tell the story. Now, if you want to make that a real pretty with graphics or parsed up and sectioned out, that's fine. But it's the content. And real quick, I was reminded of a saying this morning that I forgot about, is the way to tell if your resume is good is find a friend, a kid, a brother, a sister, somebody who's around 14 to 17 years old, be able to hand them your resume and say, do me a favor, can you read this and tell me what you think I do? And if they can't, you need to go back and edit.
Interesting. If you get too technical and too in the weeds with jargon and that sort of thing.
It's easy for us to do, yes.
Interesting. Now, one of the things that I always advise is when you're looking at your resume, and this actually holds true and it is really magnified from a LinkedIn profile, is start your research as you're updating things and just look at the jobs that you want to get, right? Do a search on LinkedIn and see how your profile matches up. You'll see when you click on a job, it'll say in the corner, you are a 3 out of 5 match. And it'll actually list these keywords that you matched with. You matched on sourcing and recruiting, but you didn't match on data analytics and ETS management, whatever the case is. That's sort of how you're coming up. So if you look at that, you're like, well, wait a second, I have these skill sets. All that means is you just didn't put those keywords in your resume. And thus, if someone is searching for someone like you might not come up for that because you don't have those keywords or all of those keywords, or you might be ranked a little bit lower. You might be the 3rd page that comes up. So pay attention to that. And the other thing really important is pay attention to the language that the companies you want to work for are using in their job description. Yes. I've advised candidates for a while, and I've taken this advice myself, and I constantly am doing this. Go bullet by bullet, read the bullet, and say to yourself, have I done this? Honestly, answer it. If you feel like you have, is it in my resume? Well, if it isn't, I think that's kind of a clear step in what you need to do, right? If it is in your resume, are you saying it in the exact same way that you're seeing these companies are asking it? If you're saying it in one way and someone else is saying it in a different way, there could be a chance when someone reads over your resume, it just doesn't resonate. They don't make the connection. So be willing to update your resume to make sure that language matches. Statistically, your resume gets only a couple seconds of review if they're looking through hundreds or even more. So make sure it's speaking in the same language.
Yeah.
I would even take it one step farther. For anybody here that is a recruiter and has written job descriptions, I would say I'm going to challenge you to. Many times we have a template we have to work with that HR and legal has sanitized. So when you go through that job, definitely look at the bullet points, but go see where the text differs, where they actually put the meat of the job in, and do a second review to see if the tone of that one is different than we want a responsible person with good communication skills. Get down to the job itself and look at those bullet points. If those are different, I'd focus a little bit more on those.
We have a question from the chat room. If you guys want to answer, from Lindsay Cassell. Thanks for asking a question. If you guys have any questions, you can put them in the chat room and I'll go through them. But she wants to know, it takes a long time to optimize and tailor your resume. Sometimes it takes her 1 to 2 hours per position. Is it better to cast a wide net or she says, spearfish? So should you tailor it to every single position you're looking for?
Good question. Alan, it seems like you were raising your hand in excitement on this one.
So I'm going to give you so Lindsay, I'm going to give you a tactical answer for this. What I would suggest is create a @Lindsay Caldwell master resume. And the reason you want to do that is you want to put every single bullet point you've ever done in there. It's a living, breathing thing you always go back to. Longest resume I ever got, 54 pages. Now, so what you're going to do with that is if it takes you 1 to 2 hours, it will take time, but as you get better, it'll get shorter. But what you can do is if you create that master and you drop all those bullet points in of everything you've ever done, then when you go to apply to a job, it should be easier for you to say, pull up that master resume, rename it Lindsay Cassell _ IBM, and then the date, and you'll always have the right resume if you get called. And now you start deleting everything that's obviously not a fit. And then you have to scan it a couple of times, but that way you'll be always operating off of a master resume, and you'll never have to think, oh yeah, three applications ago, I did this on a resume. I got to go find that resume. Oh, I suggest you always operate off a master resume, and that should be helpful.
Yeah, Alan, if I can just piggyback on that, I have candidates or job seekers who have, 10, 15, 20 years of experience, and they don't want to send a 54-page resume. What I've had them do is actually create a resume matrix, so an Excel spreadsheet. And then there they would actually have all of their different versions in columns. And then that way it was easier for them to kind of copy and paste, pick up content that they wanted then to use to say, is this my 2-page version or my three-page version? But it also gave them opportunity to kind of harmonize the information. So it didn't really seem like a potluck, like they're at the buffet and you threw a bunch of stuff on the resume, but they could see how they were really telling a story or creating some continuity about what version of themselves they're actually sharing with an employer when they were submitting their resume.
Yeah,
it's a really great idea, and I used to recommend something similar in terms of making sure that you sort of have the core bullets that you're probably going to put on 90% of whatever resumes you sent, and then instead of trying to customize everything, if it's taking you 2 hours, what I would say is make sure that you're doing the first 2 bullets and then the last bullet or something along those lines. So at least the first and last thing they read what you've done currently is what's going to be kind of most customizable. And there's definitely a balance between rewriting a brand new resume for every single role and understanding kind of what really is core that you probably want to represent on everything. And then, that could be 50% of your bullet, on those bullets. And then the other 50% you're just going to pick up. And I really like Alan's idea because you're kind of building your own repository instead of writing it from scratch. You'll start noticing that there are patterns in how people are communicating things that you're picking up on. Awesome. Real
quick follow-up on that, Brett, because we had a follow-up question, and I think it's probably going to be along the same answer, but I just want to make sure that we answer it.
Sure.
If you're sort of a Renaissance person or a person of all trades and you've got a diverse set of skills, Beth Young was wondering if she was wondering, should you also what could you do? Should you do the same thing to attract recruiters or to do your job search? If you're diverse, should you tailor to that specific job if you have like all kinds of skill sets?
So I'll jump in, and I think this is one where you'll hear kind of 3 different opinions. My advice is always you want to sell to the consumer, right? You want to highlight your background as you believe, and again, believe is a subjective word because you're not always getting everything you need from the job description, as you believe that is going to be most relevant. It's kind of like if you're selling a car to someone, you're like, oh, it goes 1,000 miles an hour and you'll look great cruising down Santa Monica Boulevard. And really that person's like, that's great, but I just want something that will consistently get me to and from work every single day. There's going to be a bit of a disconnect. So if you take a moment and think about what they're looking for and highlight your skills as best relevant to that, I think that aligns you up for the most success.
Perfect. Thanks, Brett. That was from Vera Santos, by the way. Beth, I'll get to yours in just a moment. Go ahead, Brett.
Absolutely. A couple quick hacks in terms of resume optimization or just getting an overview. There's a couple of free, like jobscan.co has a couple of free trials where you put in your LinkedIn and your resume and you put in a job and it tries to see how well you match based on a keyword match. It's okay. Another great way to do it is if you go to like a word cloud maker. Wordle was the original one. Now there's a bunch. You could cut and paste literally your resume or LinkedIn profile, and it will highlight, basically it makes a word cloud. So the biggest, boldest words in that word cloud are the most consistent, repetitive keywords on your resume. And if you compare that to the job description, you sort of get a sense, okay, what words are appearing most often? Is that the same as my resume? It's not the be-all, end-all, but it's a way to take a step back and say, okay, what words are most likely going to be seen most often? Awesome.
Hey, Brett, you know what?
Yep.
While we're on it, I'll go ahead and ask Beth's question. How many recruiters would you say you've hired, Brett, in your?
I would say probably like 50, 60. I mean, just in the last 2 years alone was probably like 20 or 30. I mean, a lot. I've worked on big teams. I've hired recruiters from the ground up and trained them. I've hired recruiters coming from the agency world into an in-house environment. And if I've hired that many, I've interviewed, 5x multiple.
Yeah.
So I get asked this question a lot, and it's a big topic we have at our conference, the TechRecruit conferences. What are the skills that you look for in a recruiter when you're hiring recruiters? So Beth Young had this question: what are the top 3 when you're hiring a recruiter for your TA teams? What are the top 3 non-negotiable things you look for on a resume? What makes a good recruiter?
That's awesome.
That's interesting. Because I'm a people person, so I am less concerned with sort of what's on a resume. Like I might even look at it for a short period of time. I care more about the kind of conversation that we have, and I care more about these things like being resourceful, right? You don't have to know everything, but you should have an understanding of like where you might go to find out about that. I like work ethic and kind of hustle, I'll call it, right? Because I don't think I feel I can't train on that. So I like someone who has been in an environment that has been challenging and understands urgency and understands hustle, like understands the mentality that I'm sure everyone on this call probably understands by nature of the fact that you're on this call, that sometimes if opportunity doesn't knock, you have to create a door. You can't sit back and wait and hope. There's always a different way. Yeah. And because you run headfirst into a wall today, and you're like, ow, that hurt. Like tomorrow, you're going to wake up and run a different way into that same wall. And that sort of resilience, that sort of understanding urgency, that's sort of what I care about. But I'm sure Alan and Kim will have a kind of a slightly different opinion. Alan, what's your thoughts?
It's kind of similar. I think that there's a kind of a technical experience relevant range for the job you're hiring that you want the person to be within. And then I think it's really more about characteristics and attributes and, like you said, hustle and what how it fits into that particular job. When I built one team, one of the biggest things is they needed to be intellectually curious. They needed to have hustle and be driven. And at some point during the conversation, they had to display they were unafraid to pick up the phone cold and call somebody. And that was basically it. And we went from there, and I was very fortunate. We went 5 for 5. But I think you also need to read the room and read the job, depending upon what you're hiring for. Yeah. If you're hiring for a technical sourcer, that's one. If you're hiring for a process talent acquisition, a TAM manager, a TAM manager that's going to have a sourcing team behind them, and they're going to have their clients, the various departments. That's a different skill set, and you want to just focus on that.
Okay, really good. I want to add real quickly a story from People Analytics story, actually, because I think there's such fundamental stories within there. And a company they analyzed all these annual reviews and looked for the top 2 skill sets that came up that were most important to the company. And I think this could apply to any role. And I tell this to people because I think fundamentally this can take you to so many places. And if you're in an interview and you're thinking along these lines, but here's the top 2 skills. Number 1 was ownership of your project. So hand holding and needing help all the time can really debilitate managers, although there's training and what have you, but your ability to own your own process and be resourceful, yummy. Managers love that, right? Make everybody's job easier. So just ownership of your process, especially if it's a startup environment. And the number 2, the second most thing that they really valued and was cross communication. Being able to get up out of your desk and communicate with other people in other departments and just have that social network within your company. Okay, so those are the 2 things.
Yeah, let me add really quickly 2 things: being an indispensable resource and being a problem seeker. And so COVID-19 overnight transformed everybody's organization. And a lot of people couldn't help what happened, but other organizations were somewhat of a pause. And so being able to quickly pivot, if I don't have 100 recs open, but I know I still need a talent pipeline, can you quickly pivot and still prove yourself as an indispensable resource to your team? Because all of the days that we begged for enough time in our day to build a talent pipeline, can you use yourself that way now? And then the second one is being a problem seeker, not just a problem solver, a problem seeker. Are you able to point out holes in your process or deficiencies or things that can make your organization better, and you tackle that and are able to actually implement that. Those are great skill sets to have.
And I'll throw out 2 interview questions that I normally use to kind of assess critical thinking and just to gain a sense of where the mindset is. One question that I always ask is, you have to produce a list of prospects tomorrow, and LinkedIn's down. Where do you go?
Yeah.
And really, all I'm looking for is, can you name anything besides LinkedIn? Like, can you think outside the box? And surprisingly, and this probably, I wish you guys all had your cameras on, because I'm sure there's a couple of you be like, oh God, like, who couldn't answer that? Let me tell you, like, I've seen more wheels fall off the tracks from a question where the right answer is really any answer. Like, I'd accept, well, I know my top 10 competitors, I'm going to start on their web pages because usually they list some of their executives and I could start there. Or really anything, a conference, or, I'd look at this, or I'd search here. I don't even need a technical answer. That, and I generally like ask people to walk me through their search process from they get a role till the role's closed. And I'm not looking for one specific way, because I don't believe there's one right way to go about it. What I'm looking for is, do you understand why you're doing things that way? If you have an intake, how long is your intake and why? Have you thought about anything else? What information do you generally get? If you do a search, where do you go to? Do you start here and then you message 10 people? But do you have a process? Do you have an understanding of why you do that process? And have you thought about alternatives or different ways if your first step doesn't get you where you want? And if you could articulate that, I found that to be a huge success factor in people that I've hired.
All right, just a
Awesome.
time check. We got 30 minutes left. Thank you, Eric Guerrero, who's on the back end helping moving us along. And Lenore Mutin, I believe that you had asked just exactly what Brett said, so I think that answers your question. She asked, asked if the difference between sourcers and recruiting and the skill sets. And I think if you're somebody who can walk through doing those Boolean searches when LinkedIn's down, like fundamentally that's a little bit more, that's majorly more the sourcing, and then recruiters are going to be more on, like, unless it's full desk, the negotiation and the management and the process management. But let's move on.
Yeah, there's really, we could spend a half an hour debating the difference between recruiting and sourcing, and really it's down to each company and how you want to interpret it. So let's move things along. So first thing, before you jump in there, is scheduling and cadence. I want you guys to understand that finding a job is a full-time job, and it's a fear-based full-time job, especially in this market. Like, you're seriously, you are doing it because you need to find a new spot, and to a lot of people, their livelihood could depend on it. And whenever you have a fear-based situation, the tendency is to just go, just spray, just get resumes out there, just start doing things. But I want to encourage you to stop. And if you're doing it right now, I want you to take a deep breath. Just breathe for a second. And I want you to think about planning your day out like it's your job. And I want you to think about not just planning out what you're going to do, but embedding time to do other things, whatever it is. If you're a runner, run. If you work out. If you do yoga, if you like listening to music, or spend time with your family. Do things that are important to you, or else you're going to burn out. This isn't a sprint marketplace. It's not even a marathon marketplace. It's like a extreme distance running sort of thing. And if you don't pace yourself, if you don't think about your day, just like you would in recruiting, you'd split your day. You'd be like, I want to do research at this time. I'm going to do my outreach during these blocks. I'm going to set aside this time for sourcing and this time for administrative work. Think about it like that. And I think that will help. Alan, you brought up a really good point in terms of kind of making sure that you kind of separate yourself out.
Yeah, I think it's important. There's 2 things. Number one is, this is a full-time job, but you also need to take care of yourself. Number one. So yes, you're full-time looking for work, but take a moment, get into some other additional habits that'll get you little wins. Start walking in the morning, do that workout that you've been thinking about doing, put it into your schedule and do it. That way, at least when you're done with that, you've had a win. And finding and looking for a job it can be soul crushing enough that you're going to need these wins. And the second thing is, go try and learn something else. Now, I'm not asking you to go learn Python, I'm saying, go learn something. Like I know everybody right now is, the big thing I think is sourdough bread. Okay, fine. But maybe you go try planting a tomato plant, or learning anything, just anything that challenges you, because you'd be surprised at what that might translate into in an interview. Because I could see a common question being, oh man, you were affected by COVID. What else have you been doing beyond looking for a job? And this shows you're more well-rounded. You went after a challenge, you've learned from it, and you've moved on. And the topic might not be as big deal, but the interviewer, I'd look at that and go, okay, well, they learned to grow a tomato plant. What'd you do? And they describe it. Well, they did something different. They went outside of their comfort zone. Oh, that tells me something. I'm more interested in this person.
Yeah. Some skill sets that are always coveted are things like Excel skill sets, PowerPoint, dashboards, insights, analytics. You could find free or cheap courses online from things like Udemy. It is actually, I have a whole list that I'll happy to send you guys a link to.
Quick one,
of
Brett.
different companies. Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. One thing, everybody, you can improve on while you do it, and this is going to be a little hard. We all have these. Okay, when you are on a phone interview or whatever, record your side of it. Don't record both sides, because many states aren't two consent states. But I still do this. I record my own phone calls, my side of it, when I'm on phone calls on a regular basis. I listen back to them. Sometimes it's not easy, but I learn and I improve. That's one I found very valuable.
That's a good suggestion, and we should talk offline about deleting some of those one-sided recordings from you and I.
Kim, I don't know if you're aware that you're muted.
I am. I didn't want you to hear my dogs.
Okay. I thought you were putting in what you've been working on or something. I just want to make sure we heard you.
So just in the interest of time, I think we covered all this. Bucket your time, schedule breaks, write down your plan, right? Don't go into this ad hoc, spur of the moment. Think about what you want to achieve. Write down a plan. How are you going to budget your time? And think about small, intermittent, achievable goals for yourself. The goal is getting hired. But you set as your goal, until it happens, you're going to be like, I'm a failure. I didn't achieve that goal. So think about it in terms of small successions to meet that goal. Maybe your goal is to reach out and have a meaningful conversation with 5 people next week. Or, you're going to focus in on 4 companies and really go after that to get them to respond to you. Whatever it is, and we'll get more into the nitty-gritty of it, do that. And that way you're like, all right, we moved it along. And guess what? Part of this is a numbers game. It's definitely a quality over quantity, but part of it is if you're not having conversations and you're not getting your resume into the right hands, you're not being found, it makes everything else a lot harder. So set achievable goals. Now, a couple quick tools. I'm going to rush through the slide because we spent 7 times the amount that we had on that first slide. Couple tools that have worked really well for me. Toggle and rescue time to stay focused. To-do list is a bunch of different ones, guys. I like Todoist. AnyDo is good. Todoist works for me because it syncs with my phone, and I get ideas in like the weirdest times. I'm running in the park, and I'm like, watching reruns of like The Blacklist or something along those lines. Something pops in my head, so I'll quickly get into my phone. It syncs with my computer, and it helps me keep organized. Tools to unclutter your mailbox, SaneBox and Enroll Me, both I believe are free, and somewhere to organize your notes. 1,000 different places to do it. I used to use Evernote. I've been using OneNote and Cherry Tree a little bit, which I didn't even list there, and Sublime Text. Just cool note programs. Just write them down. They might help you. They might not. Give it a try. I found it helpful. So let's jump into this. We're going to jump into the active part, right? And as we said before, the active part is really 2 things. It's finding and being found. How are we going to find the jobs, or better yet, have the jobs find you? Yeah. So 2 distinct things, but often, are working in sync with each other. And, more of the proactive side, which is, okay, well, if jobs don't find me and clicking the apply button isn't working, which a lot of times that's the case because there's high competition, how am I going to get my details into the right person's hands? And that's going to be really important, and we're going to focus a lot more on the proactive side. We're going to breeze through some of the reactive stuff. It's some quick tips, but I think a lot of the discussion is that you guys are interested in is how do I do that? How do I get my resume separated from the stack of 1,000 others.
Yeah.
Kim, did you want to say something? Sorry, it looked like a...
No.
Okay. So in terms of being found, talent communities, most companies have them. Get a version of your resume. If you have a graphical version, which I particularly like, get one that isn't, something that's a little bit more ATS friendly, and make sure you're getting it out to the talent communities. Why? Is this going to get you your next job? Probably low ROI, but if someone from these companies are searching their ATS and you're not in there, you have a 0% chance. Now, Alan, I know you had some really good advice in terms of before you even think about getting your resume or applying on LinkedIn, some things that help bring you to the top of the pile.
Oh, so on LinkedIn, there used to be, and I think it still exists, when I create and post a job on LinkedIn, within Recruiter, one of the first things it does is it says, hey, instantly, here's a list of the top 50 people you might want to be looking at. Now, if you follow my company, you are automatically or have a higher chance of getting on that list. So my advice to you is, while you're scrolling through looking where to apply, I would say before you apply to the job through LinkedIn, I would go back real quick and follow the company, give it an hour to maybe get through the LinkedIn system and everything else, then apply to the job, because it's a newly posted job, and that might help you. And I would also follow any company you're slightly interested in or you think you might, go follow them really quickly, and hopefully when they create a new job for Recruiter, whatever, you'll pop up. So
follow people from the company and follow the company itself.
Yes.
Awesome. Another hack that I believe is still working is every time you update your LinkedIn profile, even if it's a small update, a grammatical one, that triggers you to get to show up higher up in someone's list when someone does a search, because LinkedIn is trying to get the people that are most active in front of the companies that are most active to hire. That's how they portray themselves as a talent market. So the more often you do that, the more often you get reminders. People like, oh, look, someone just updated their LinkedIn profile, and it increases relevancy. You keep seeing you, they keep seeing you, they keep seeing you. That's going to put you ahead of other people. Now, Kim, you actually had some good advice in terms of kind of expanding into some atypical or expanding kind of talent communities.
Yeah, so this is what I call my professional trolling. So in addition to following companies, I follow people. I'm also part of a number of groups. So for example, Stacy has the TechRecruit group. I am always scrolling through who has liked and commented on the content that she puts out, because it expands my network for people that may not have been on my radar. I do that in every single group that I'm part of: TechRecruit, ERE, ATAP, corporate recruiters. I do that on both on LinkedIn and on Facebook, because now I am also the beneficiary of all of the things that those people are putting out. I might have missed an opportunity because I've just been living in my own little universe. I've now expanded my universe because I'm consuming information that's coming in from other people who are part of those groups. So that's how I supplement my talent communities, by using some of the other social groups that I'm part of to follow, and then to be fed and pushed additional information.
That's a really good point. And to jump on that and add to that, if you're interested in a company and you've sort of identified who the hiring managers might be, or people that seem to have a senior title, if they're commenting on things or they're posting things, comment on it, share it out.
Yes.
Right? This is really good advice, and you want to do it and be strategic. Like, you don't want to write something that would be inappropriate or anything along those lines, but like it, share it. You're increasing their social metrics, right? Their visibility, and they're probably going to see your name. They might not put two and two together initially, but all these things start adding up, and it's like, I remember Alan shared this, and then all of a sudden, their resume is like Alan, and there's like a name recognition. It's like you start recognizing the person's brand.
Yeah.
Cool. Automatic updates, right? This is, if you're going to go after and look for companies that are hiring, which, obviously they're hiring, so why wouldn't you? You don't have to look through every job board every single day. All these have updates. Play around with the searches you want to do to make sure you're getting the job searches that make sense in the geographical regions, and then set the alerts, and you'll get emails from them every single day, which takes a lot of administrative time. Also, there are programs like Distill.io and Visual Ping, which really is an alert that a web page has been updated. It's not specifically for job searches, but you can actually, if you're on a company's page and you're like, I really want to work here, you could set one of these to alert you anytime they change their page. Now, you'll get alerts when they remove jobs and add jobs and when a graphic changes in the background, but play around with it and it'll give you another update. If you're curious on all the different job boards out there, if you go to betterteam.com/job boards, they list like 70 of them. I just, no reason, just pick the first ones that came up when I Google job board, just to get the logos up there. Also, take a look at hiring lists, right? There's a lot of companies that just aren't posting jobs, or maybe the aggregators aren't picking up their jobs because they're smaller. Well, guess what? Now there's a lot of hiring lists and companies that are hiring lists that are directly a result of people's response to everything that's going on with COVID. And you might see a company that's hiring that you might not find their job. So take a look at that. Stacy, I know you're always a big fan of built-in. We might have people that are in different markets. I love Built-in too. There's Built-in New York. It's like a local tech job board of sorts.
They're very much like there's a Chicago-based company, but then there's Built-in New York, Built-in Chicago, Built-in Los Angeles. But now in this virtual environment where everybody's working from home, I wonder if they're rethinking combining those. Just a thought, because now it's everywhere. 10 minutes, guys.
All right. Well, so let's move forward from here. If you guys want, you guys see this link on the bottom, bit.ly.covid job searching. It's a huge collection of different hiring lists, layoff lists, resources. 90% of it is absolutely free. Some premium things snuck in there, but
right.
Yeah.
Give me 10 seconds. So for everybody on this call, I was looking at the chats and some other things, and someone made a comment the other day. People are saying, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And then others are putting their profile up. That's great. I've already gotten 5 invites while we've been on this thing. So if you're here, don't, and I hate to say it, this is going to be really Machiavellian, and I apologize up front. Take the work off of our shoulders. Send me the connection. Remind me where we met. We met on the WebEx. I'll accept it. That will help you build out your brand instead of asking us to go back. And I may not have access, or the chat may scroll and I can't find it. So heads up, please continue.
Right, and I physically can't see the chat because I'm so worried my PowerPoint's going to crash. So I'm not loading up any other videos. So 2 quick time hacks that I like a lot. First one is, actually I'm going to back up for a second. First one is OneTab. If you guys don't know, OneTab is a recruiter's best friend, because if you have one of those situations where there's 1,000 tabs open and you're going to crash your Chrome browser, you sort of click on it and it closes. And it takes all those tabs and puts it on a list that you can go back to. However, I use it to kind of categorize tabs that might be appropriate to job hunting. So for an example, and I just did a quick little demo on this. What I did is I went and I put in searches for 17 different job boards. And then with one click, I could load every single one of those 17 up. And then I have everything I want in case I'm not getting alerts, whatever those cases are. And at the end of the day, I could also save it as a web page automatically and then share it with someone. So you could literally, if you guys hold your phone up to your computer screen right now and scan this, you'll see those 17 job boards that I put in the word recruiter and searched for. And that will load up in a list. So very cool, absolutely free. It saves me a ton of time because I generally have like 300 windows open, and then I'm on something else, and then I just minimize it with one tab. The second one is called Hunter, H-U-N-T-R, not to be confused with H-U-N-T-E-R. New company. It's interesting. They're kind of like a Trello board specifically for job hunting, right? Meaning you could pull in a job ad from anywhere. You see something on Career Builder, on Indeed, on LinkedIn, you could use their Chrome extension, it'll pull it into this board, and you could actually move these boards through different stages, whatever you want. You could add notes, contacts. It even has a contact finding sort of functionality internally in it. It's brand new. It's still coming about. There are things I like, things I don't. I use it a lot in the beginning, and I haven't used it as much lately. I think I just started recording things in different places, and it just became a little bit superfluous to my own internal process as I evolved it and continue to. But it's kind of cool, and for you visual person, if you're more of a visual person, it's an easy way to kind of keep everything centrally located. Cool. So let's get into the meat of everything with 15 minutes left. Proactive is really important,
10.
right? 10 minutes. Well, guys, for anyone who are worried, we're going to pick this material up next week. So, and we're here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you want. So proactive is a part of the process where you've decided applying isn't working for me. I need to take a more proactive approach to getting my resume to the right person. It really should be your first and not your last step, in my humble opinion. I think that so many people are applying, so many people are just applying. The name of the game is to stand out, to be different, to do something different, to get your resume singled out as apart from the pile. And I'm a quick slide, and we're not getting into these, but a bunch of apps that we'll talk about at some stage during these webinars that have been really helpful to me. Email automation tools, Replyify, I love Sales Handy, email tracking, to find people's contact details, especially work email. Swordfish is now offering it for free, work emails. You could pay for personal emails. Scrap and Get Prospect, I love because it syncs with Zapier and I could do some automation with it. ZapInfo and Hunter with an ER straddle both categories because they both kind of find and also have a verification standpoint. We could verify that email. Prospecting automation tools like Prospect In, which is I think fairly new. Scrap and SellHack, which is actually made by the same guy as Replyify, and Grammarly and Crystal, which are really good in helping to craft the message that's going to resonate with a target. So screen cap this, or screen cap your screen now. We'll certainly get into more of these as we go in, or maybe do more of a technical smurge. So proactive, 3 areas: who, where, and how is really what we're going to focus on, and really kind of how you think about it. And in terms of the who, and this is going to be really interesting because I made this slide and then I realized Alan has a really good point of view, and so does Kim for that matter. But in my mind, the best way to get yourself in is go through your first level connections. And I mean that figuratively and literally, meaning people you're closely related with, or have a good relationship with, your first connections on LinkedIn, someone that you could reach out to and say, hey, would you mind getting my details into the right person? And to me, I think second level is really good, but I'd put it lower on the scale. And then obviously if your first connections, or your first connections, if you're not able to find a way to crack the door open, then you start getting into the cold approaches, which is trying to figure out who's the right person to contact. One great hack here, sometimes it's someone in TA, sometimes it's like a CEO of a smaller company. I've had a lot of success trying to network in, if I have to go cold, through the sales guys or the business development guys, because they are people that inherently understand networking, right? They like being the ones to connect people. They're connectors naturally, and quite frankly, not many people are doing it. Everyone's flooding HR, flooding TA people, and it's a slightly different way of saying, hey, I know you work in sales, and in companies I've worked for, the sales have always been the heartbeat of an organization. I love, and then something personal about the company and why you're interested. Would you be able to shoot my resume over to the right place and help make an introduction or something along those lines? I found that to be really successful, as well as warming up conversations by doing some due diligence, not just reaching out cold, but understanding who you're reaching out to, where are they posting, do they have a YouTube video? Is there something you could use to capture their attention that creates a personal link that shows you're not just spray and praying, but you've invested time into them? And Alan, I know you have a really good point of view, and so do you, Kim. So what's your take on this?
Well, I think when we talked, I think the second level connections might be somewhat equal and slightly, if they were next to, I'd put them next to each other, but drop second level just slightly, because in studies I've read some time ago, it's that your second level connections can actually be just as effective, and it all depends on the way you approach it. Look, if we're looking for jobs and you call your first level connections, you're going to say you're looking for a job. If you're talking with a second level connection and they're intelligent, they know what you're looking for. But what you're looking for is, you would ask them for coaching, for their opinion. That does not reply in reciprocation. Where if you ask for a favor, a solid, there's a lot of conversation right now in the recruiting space with people that are still working, of people that we get spray and prayed by somebody that says, hey, Alan, you worked at Gensler Architecture back here. Could you forward my resume on for this job? And I'm thinking, and it's like, I don't know you. I know nothing about you. I don't know how I can really help you. So what I would say is, Also, your second level connections, if you think of the WIFA model, what's in it for me? If you call on a second level connection and ask for their coaching, or say, hey, Brett, I know you're connected with some people over at company X, and it happens to be Stacy and Kim. And I said, look, there's this job that I think I'm pretty good for. Do you have any suggestions on what might be the best way to approach it? I haven't asked him to refer me. He will, and I've treated him professionally. There's no skin off Brett's nose. There's no downside if he thinks I'm a decent person, and it's all good and a good return on investment for him if he refers me to Kim and Stacy and I get hired. So you have to consider your ask, and I think that second level connections can be just as effective as first level. And you also kind of find out who your friends are, and you also find out, does that second level connection now move up to first level?
Let me add one thing to that, because Alan, you mentioned what's in it for me. It is not shameful to remind people that you're asking to refer you, to mention or ask, does your company have an employee referral program?
Oh, yeah.
So I am sending you an awesome resume. I'm an awesome candidate. And if your company has an employee referral program, you may then receive something if I'm hired. That is not shameful at all. And so the whole what's in it for me might be $1,000 or $2,500. And so when you are extending that invitation because you're looking for an opportunity, remind that person that your company probably has an employee referral program that's incentivized through some type of cash amount. Don't miss that money. I am a great candidate, and I would appreciate you being an advocate for me.
And to close that one out, many times the applicant tracking system flags employee referrals.
But referrals, yes, absolutely. If it's a good applicant tracking system.
That's true.
Well,
you guys, we're going to have to wrap this up. Do you have a final summary? Because we'll continue next week, but we got some. We got to make those announcements. Go ahead, Brett.
Well, do we have any time for any questions, or are we completely?
There was a couple questions. One was I answered it, but it was, and I'll see if we can get consensus. The question was, I have no experience. I just completed a course, like I'm out of college. What do I put on my resume? I suggested they put all of the projects they did in school, sports, any extracurricular activities, because while you have no experience, it's massively impressive and important for a company to see that you went above and beyond while you're in school and you did extra activities or projects or what you were working on.
That's one. And the other one, because I recruit a lot of engineering students, yes, Stacy is completely on point with that. The other thing that a lot of students make a mistake on is they leave out their part-time jobs. And if you had any part-time jobs, list them, and not only list the tasks. If you were a server at a restaurant, for example, true story, I served food, I presented them the checks and everything, but you want to include your people experiences, your interaction with people, your problem solving. And it may not sound like a lot to you, but as a new graduate, that's what separates you. When you say, oh yeah, I did this, and oh God, when I first started, I spilled and I dropped so many things and people were really mad at me and I didn't know why. And then I learned how to talk to people. I learned how to communicate with people, and a smart interviewer will pick up on that. And so it needs to be on the resume.
Okay. All right. So
one last thing before we leave. I'm excited to pick this up next time, but here's my pledge to everyone out there. You guys are all recruiters. Find my email address. If you guys have questions, I promise a response within 48 hours, maybe even sooner. I regularly speak with recruiters, give advice, and also just kind of help. And this is where it's important, kind of help trade tips. I really do believe that there are, that everyone out there, there's probably a lot of you that are doing some really cool things that we've never even heard of, or have taken a slightly different approach, and actually the power is within the community. And I'm really happy to have those conversations. I'm happy to help anywhere I can, or just, see how we can point each other in the right direction.
This has been an excellent talk. We're going to carry it on for the month of June with new speakers each time. We hope you'll join us next Thursday, same time. We'll send you the link, all of the people who are participating today. And if you have any additional questions, reach out to Brett, reach out to Kimberly Jones, reach out to Alan Fleur, reach out to myself. I'm happy to connect you in any way we can. What we just want to do is provide for you a strategy so you can follow that and you can make the progress that you want. But no, if you're just blasting your resume and then you just sit the next day and no one gets back to you, it's going to deplete you and you're going to feel beaten and it's gonna really get to you. So just don't do that process. That's a number one way to lose. I would like to maybe do the results of our poll before we go. What is the most common method for job searching? Most people said all the above, but I would say the second most one was apply everywhere. And just like I said, if you do that and you just apply as many places as you can with a blanket resume, you're not going to get the response, and you're just going to start to feel depressed about it. So you really have to have a strategy. I hope we've explained that here today. Okay, so thank you so much. We'll see everybody next week, and we'll have 3 shows for the Summer of Learning. You can learn about those at techrecruit.io in the Summer of Learning. So on Tuesdays at 9 a.m., it's Dueling Sorcerers, and we're going to launch that off with Dean DaCosta and Steve Levy, who are going to take 2 strategies on how to source talent. It's going to be fun. And then, of course, the Service Desk with Eric Tuero, and he's going to talk about all the things with video and everything on the back end of your computer to make sure your work-at-home experience is teched out to the max. And then 3, the show right here, the Job Search series, and with Brett and myself and various others. But we'll see you guys next week. Have a great weekend. And Kim and Alan and Brett, thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.